A very good morning to you. Welcome into the programme. The HSE has advertised the post for new grads indeed, which will see them taking a significant decrease in the salary which they're currently getting. And joined by two INMO members in studio, Mary Leahy and Anne Burke. Ladies, good morning to you.
Good morning, Keith.
I'll go to Anne in a second about the coalface. Mary, what exactly has been advertised this morning?
Well, what was advertised, Keith, before Christmas was a joint initiative between the Department of Health and the HSE, where they say they're going to recruit 1,000 new graduate nurses at 80% of agreed salary rate. And what we're saying is they're actually going to be sacking or displacing 1,000 nurses to make way for this, what we would call discrimination and exploitation of new graduate nurses.
And why are they doing this? Is this a cost-cutting measure?
Well, obviously it's a cost-cutting measure.
Where do they think they're going to get people to work for 20% less than they're currently working for?
Well, and to make a point there, Keith, is these graduates who went into college in 2008 went in assuming that they were going to get the agreed rate of salary, which at that time was €33,470. Now they're going to end up on €22,000 a year, which is significantly below what it's actually a total pay cut of €11,500 in 3 years.
So you're saying that they were promised when they did training
when they started their degree 4 years ago, the salary at that time was €33,470. Now, since then, all nurses and midwives have taken a gross salary cut of 14%, which is translated as a 20% net when you take in the pension levy. But all new appointees to the public service are all being brought in on a 10% less, again, which is a 24% cut in total to date. And now the HSE and the Department of Health want these new graduates to take a further pay cut of 20%. So they, in effect, would be working as a regulated profession with full responsibility for patient care, doing full hours for 80% of the agreed salary rate.
And do you reckon will the new grads take up on this?
Well, our feedback from our grad members, Keith, is they're absolutely so insulted and so upset at this, and they are saying that they're going to emigrate and they're not going to take it up.
So it'll be the country's loss. So we've trained these nurses.
Yeah.
They've agreed to get a salary. They're getting 11,000, as you said, less, and they're just going to hit for the hills.
Well, that's what they're telling us. And the backdrop to this, Keith, is that the public will all be aware of the terminology moratorium, and the moratorium has been that in recent years there has been a complete cessation of employing nurses and midwives in the public service to reduce numbers. Now, the INMO have always spoken out. In turn, what the system brought in was they allowed the unplanned and uncontrolled exodus of clinicians from the health service, and whoever wanted to leave in recent years could leave. Now, the INMO have always spoken out against that, so we've had a critical shortage of staff on the front line, and I can speak, for example, in public health, we have approximately 1,600 public health nurses in the country, and last year alone 150 of those public health nurses left the service, and in return 30 places have been created in college for the HDIP and public health to replace. So we're having 30 nurses coming in to replace the loss of 150. So we have a huge exodus of staff out of the public service and leaving huge skill shortages in the public service, and of course those skills have to be met. So now what the HSE have been relying on in recent years is the employment of agency nurses, and we've always spoken out against this because agency nurses have to be paid the same rate as any nurse, but in addition to that there's a VAT charge on top of an agency nurse of 23%, and there's an agency charge of 5.5%, so there's a 28.5% increased cost to the taxpayer to employ an agency nurse as opposed to a directly employed nurse. So we've always advocated that the nurses be employed directly by the HSE. It's better for patients.
But why not do it on short-term contracts if this is what they want to do, and renew the contracts on an annual basis, but just roll them over on a 12-monthly basis?
Exactly, and these agency nurses who will now be displaced could actually apply for those jobs because it wouldn't be exclusively for, say, new graduates as such. Whereas at the moment now these agency staff are going to actually be sacked and displaced to allow the graduate-only nurses to come in, because an agency nurse traditionally would have 7 or 8 years experience. They won't be eligible to apply for these new positions. And I want to emphasise, Keith, this morning on Morning Ireland, Mr. Barry O'Brien, who's the HR directive in the HSE, insisted that there would not be staff sacked or displaced. And I have here in front of us that letter from Mr. O'Brien issued to management in the HSE on the 14th of December, which clearly states that if there are any contracts already issued to graduate nurses, they were to be rescinded and terminated.
He's only using
so that they can be issued, so they can apply for their own jobs at 80% of pay. Now, I'd say, Keith, as well, and this might be controversial to say, but it's my belief that there's a huge sexist slant to this, because when you look back at all of the recent cuts, we have had cuts to the respite grant, which are predominantly carers, a predominantly female group. We have a taxation of maternity pay. We have an attack on child benefit, and now we have an attack on a predominantly female profession. So we do believe that there's that element to it as well.
Anne Burke, you're at the coalface, and I'm in and out of your fine hospital for the last 3 weeks, and it's absolutely a madhouse in there. You couldn't survive without the new grads.
Certainly not, Keith. The newly qualified nurses, who are currently approximately 20 of them working in our hospital at the moment, our hospital would not have the open wards that it has at the moment without those newly qualified nurses. The reality is that just prior to the Christmas, because of the pre-existing deficit of staff directly related to the moratorium on recruitment, the management in GUH was forced to close a ward and disperse the staff around 2 other wards in order to maintain the service right throughout the Christmas period. So, and that included the existing newly qualified staff. Now, if you were to remove those newly qualified staff, and if they were to up and go, it would have a detrimental effect on the hospital. There is no doubt about it that the staffing of the hospital and the maintenance of the service and provision of service would simply be compromised if those 20 nurses upped and left. And they will go. We have met with them. We have discussed it with them. Many of them attended the rally in Croke Park last Saturday, and they are adamant. They want respect for the 4 years of academic training and practical training that they have had to become regulated professionals.
Well, what seems to me is that doesn't seem to be joined up thinking on this. The government seems hell-bent, and the HSE seems hell-bent to train them for export. It's kind of like the beef trade now for export. Really, that's what they're doing. They're training them for Australia, they're training them for the UK and for other areas. Why can't we have a little bit of vision and use them to our own benefit? Well,
I'm afraid vision is what is severely lacking at a national level in relation to this ludicrous what the HSE call an incentive, because it just simply does not work.
But I'm sure some parents will be pushing newly graduated nurses to apply for these. But I mean, why would you do this to them? So you'll have one nurse who's paid 33,470 or thereabouts. You'll have another one paid 22,000. Why pit one against the other on the ground?
Well, that's what the HSE at a national level are attempting to do now. In fairness, and one has to be fair about this locally, and I'd like to take this opportunity to commend the management and our Executive Director of Nursing and the nursing management in GUH, who have, from the 1st of January, given full 100% contracts for 100% work to the 20 newly qualified staff that we have. In fairness, that has to be recognised here this morning.
Okay. So and
we commend them for that very proactive and visionary move to retain the staff, the newly qualified staff, at the 100% rate of existing pay scale. Because other than that, Keith, the reality is that if I'm telling a nurse at the moment, or if I'm telling a patient at the moment that it'll be 20 minutes before I get them, or 30 minutes before I'll be able to give them their medication, or an hour before I'll be able to put up the drip on any ward or in my emergency department, let me tell you, if we lose those 20 newly qualified staff, those patients will be waiting 2 hours. They'll be waiting 3 hours, and the queues will be going out the doors of our hospitals because the wards will close. Our wards at the moment are at absolute breaking point. Sometimes, and certainly before Christmas, we had the existence of staffing levels equivalent to night duty levels on days. I had contact from nurses who expressed such deep concern about unsafe staffing levels prior to Christmas. Now, you remove 20 nurses from that, because those 20 nurses want to be treated equally, and they have the right to be treated equally to any other staff nurse. If you remove those, then that service will collapse.
Just briefly, can I ask you, you're saying to me there, Mary Lee, that a staff nurse on this new scheme will be 22,000 and a care assistant will be what?
Care assistant would be earning between 7,000 and 8,000 more than the staff nurse. Now, the care assistants are
crucial
invaluable to the health. The health service could not function without them.
There's a further anomaly.
But what I'm saying is that why bother going to college and putting yourself out there after a 4-year honours degree, and you're a regulated professional where you have the responsibility of patient care? Why do that for 7,000 or 8,000 less than somebody who isn't regulated?
And can I ask you, how long will this contract be for, the 22,000 contract? Is it for 1 year, and could you be guaranteed?
No, the HSE have said that this contract will be for 2 years. So automatically it will displace every agency nurse and any nurse also that was on a panel to be appointed, that had done an interview and waiting to be appointed. So the HSE came out and they said, yes, this will be for 2 years and it'll give you employment for 2 years, and there'll be additional mentoring and educational benefits that will go with it. The reality is on the ground, Keith, the ability of staff nurses, experienced staff nurses, to mentor new staff is really at a skeleton level at the moment, because
they're up to the vote.
These newly qualified nurses be under no illusion, and I would say to the public at the moment, and to our local representatives, elected local representatives, who have a responsibility to own up to the crisis that bedevils our health service at the moment on the coalface. These newly qualified nurses are doing the same as, and if not more, than would have ordinarily been expected of them in a good, healthy, staffed environment. Years ago, when we had good, robust staffing levels on our wards, all those newly qualified nurses would have been mentored, would have been coached, would have been brought along. Now, that opportunity rarely exists because of the deficit in staff.
Finally, can I ask you, and just in relation to, I passed through A&E a few times this week, and it looked absolutely mental. Tuesday looked off the radar altogether.
Keith, I suppose it's words fail me at times to describe the environment that we're working in. We have made a lot of progress in GUH in the last year. There's no doubt about that. Lengths of stay have been reduced, and a lot of fine initiatives there. However, there is no doubt about it, and the public can see it for themselves. They are the service users at the end of the day. They can see that they're waiting longer to get a service. They can see that they're waiting longer to see a doctor. They can see that they're waiting longer to be treated by a nurse. The increase in the number of attendances in our department has absolutely, snowballed. And it is absolutely compromising the care, because now we're telling patients, where we told them maybe a year or two ago you might be waiting 5 to 6 hours to be seen by a doctor. Now it's nothing out of the ordinary for them to be told you'll be waiting 9 to 10 hours. People come in to me at night and to my colleagues, and they'd say, when will I be seen? And realistically, I know in my heart and say they won't be seen until the morning. So we need to get real about the increased attendances, the increased number of people that are looking for a service, and the system just is not capable at the moment of dealing with that.
Okay. Mary, very briefly, a final word to you.
If I could just say, Keith, that the comments that Anne made about people staying in hospital for shorter times, that all falls back into public health, where we're caring for people in the community, and that is a great idea, the primary health care, that we look after people away from acute settings, but the reality is it's not being funded, and we also have 200,000 people have cancelled their health insurance, so there's an increased demand on us, and I will say that staff are working under extraordinary pressure. We're understaffed, and that adversely affects patient care.
All right, Anne Burke and Mary Leahy, thank you both for joining us today. We will get a call out to each of our local representatives, but thank you for joining us today.